which is at www.athe.org. You'll begin by just mousing over the Conferences tab as shown in the screenshot with the large yellow arrow there, and a drop-down menu will appear, and you're going to select Propose a Session from that list. It's the first thing on the list. And so when you do that, the session proposal page will open. And from that page, you're going to be able to access the session proposal form and the grant request form. And Sean, you can go ahead and go to the next slide. As well as the pre or post-conference proposal forms and additional information about the proposal process, including a recording of this webinar. And Sean, if you'll go to the next slide, I just want to show a close-up of the FAQs that are available. Okay, so there at the bottom of that screen, there's a little section that says Have Questions, and this is where you can go to find FAQs about the session proposal process, multidisciplinary panels, conference grant and guest pass requests, and that's also where you'll find the links to the webinar after today's session. Okay, and you can go on to the next slide, Sean. So it's a good idea to go ahead and review some of those resources before you start the session proposal process. And we'll talk a little bit more about the rest of those links later on, but we're going to go ahead and start with the session proposal form. So to propose the session, you're going to click on the very first link on the page, which says visit the page at this link to propose a session. We can go on to the next slide. So on the first page of the session proposal process, you can read the introduction from the VP for the 2015 conference, Lionel Walsh. So it includes the theme and some different ways to think about your session proposals. And at the bottom of that page, you can click to begin your session proposal. And we can go ahead and go on to the next slide. So next you'll see a list of do's and don'ts for completing your session proposal. So please do take the time to familiarize yourself with these tips because they make the process much easier both on your end and on the administrative side. Okay, so I'm just going to go through some of them briefly now. So you do want to enter your proposal information directly into the online proposal form. Okay, you don't want to copy and paste from say from a Word document or another word processor. So I know that's a bummer not to be able to write it out ahead of time and just copy it. But the reason we can't do that is that some of the special characters and things like that get lost in translation, and we end up with kind of a mess on our end if you copy and paste, and it's hard for us to work out what's actually intended. Okay. So we ask you to use an asterisk to help indicate when you need something to be italicized, okay? And that's because italics are one of those special characters that can get lost in the process, okay? So when we see that asterisk, then we know you've got something there like a book title or a play title that needs to be italicized. We'll talk about that in a little bit more detail later. You want to enter only the first and last name of participants, so not middle initials or titles or degrees. And you want to enter just affiliation, so for example your university or your company, and not school or department names. We ask you to spell out your university name rather than use acronyms. So for example, write out City University of New York rather than writing CUNY. And we ask that you use a comma between your institution and its location. So for instance, University of Texas, comma, Austin. So rather than using a dash or something like that. And we do these things for consistency in the program book, as well as because of some of the formatting issues that I mentioned before. Okay. We do ask that you inform the presenters that are part of your session that they do need to register in order to present at the conference, okay? So that means that they have to pay for registration unless you apply for a guest pass for them, okay? And please just note that guest passes are only granted to presenters who are not involved in theater and higher education, okay? And we'll go into some more detail about the grants and guest passes later. And we'll go ahead and go on to the next slide. So just a few other tips about entering the proposal. We ask that you not use all caps in the proposal. We ask that you not add a period at the end of session title or paper titles. And we ask that you not use quotation marks unnecessarily. Okay, so for instance, don't put quotation marks around your entire paper title. Okay, so again, this is for the sake of consistency in the program book. And it's recommended that once you've submitted and received the thank you page with your submission number, that you use the print submission form option to document your proposal and keep for your files. Okay, we can go into the next screen. So remember that your session titles are going to be used in all of our program book copy, okay? So although you do have until May 1st to make final changes for the program book, do try to be as precise as possible at this early stage, okay? So here's an example of what I was talking about when you use the asterisks to indicate italics, okay? So please indicate all of your book and play titles this way, rather than doing something like using all caps or some other kind of formatting. Okay, we can go on to the next screen. So this is an example of what we see on our end. If you enter the text into another program and then copy into the form online. So you can imagine that it's a little difficult to interpret when we get it this way. Okay. And we can go on to the next screen. So there we are. This is a picture of the ATHE staff after trying to interpret this kind of formatting for 350 proposals with 5 paper titles per proposal. Okay, so we do try to email session coordinators to make sure that we have information correct if we have any questions, but it's very helpful for us if you take a moment to familiarize yourself with the do's and don'ts of the proposal submission so things are as clear as possible up front. Okay. So any questions about the session proposal process?
Cynthia, so far we have one question.
Great, thanks. I see that one. So Laura's asking, so all panelists need to pay for the conference registration before the proposal can be submitted? No, you don't need to register before the proposal is submitted. They just need to register before attending the conference. Yeah, so conference registration actually isn't even open at this point. Great question. Any other questions so far? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next screen, but please feel free to add up any questions if you still have some along the way here. Okay, so these are just some important things to remember about the proposal process. So the deadline for the session proposals is November 1st. Okay, so that means that at midnight on November 2nd Pacific time, that's when it's too late. Okay, and up until May 1st, you can still send us changes to your session chair or coordinator or your panelists. You could send us changes to affiliations or to session titles or to paper titles, okay? So we definitely understand that those things can change along the way, and you can send us those changes for the program book, okay? But after May 1st, we're not able to accept any changes for the program book, okay, of those types. After May 1st, the only kind of changes that can be requested would be if you have to cancel a panel or if there is a change in panel dates and times for some reason. Okay. Okay, we can go on to the next screen. So after you read through the pages with the reminders that we've talked about, you'll come to the first page of the proposal form itself, okay? And we'll see that page in just a moment. On that page, you're going to enter the information about the focus group or committee that's sponsoring your session. So if you are proposing a multidisciplinary session, please note that there has been a change in the requirements, and the multidisciplinary panels are now only required to have 2 sponsoring focus groups or committees rather than 3, the way that it's been in the past. All right, we can go ahead on to the next screen. So if you're submitting a panel for a single focus group or committee, you're going to select that information here on this page, okay? And if you're proposing a multidisciplinary panel, you'll need to choose your primary sponsor and then your secondary sponsor, all right? It's important that you select both of those because those will be the two groups that would be vetting your proposal, okay? If you have questions about proposing a multidisciplinary panel, you can refer to the frequently asked questions about multidisciplinary sessions, and that link is located on the conference propose a session page, right? So the page that you used to get into this form, right? So on this first page, you'll also select your session format. So you can see it's a drop-down menu to choose from, and there's also a text box in case your session format isn't included in the menu. And you'll also enter the title of your session, okay? And you'll see that that's actually on every page. And so, you know, we're moving pretty quickly through these pages, but this webinar will be posted online, so you'll have a chance to go back and look at these again if you need to, okay? And Sean, you can go ahead and go on to that next page, that's fine. Just remember that for a multidisciplinary session, you need to have the agreement of the sponsoring focus groups or committees before you submit the proposal, okay? And we also do need to know who the primary focus group or committee submitting the proposal is and who's the secondary sponsor, okay? And I'm going to pause just a moment here for a question that's come up. Are we supposed to submit abstracts at this point or just paper titles? There is a spot to give a little more detailed information about the proposal, and we'll get there in just a moment, okay? So in your proposal, you'll also be giving us some information about how the session needs to be set up and what your AV needs are, okay? So before you go in to do your proposal, just give some thought to those kinds of things. So check in with your presenters and find out what their AV needs are going to be, okay? You do need to bring your own laptop if you're planning to use one, okay? So make a plan for who's going to bring the laptop. And if you're using a Mac, just know that you do need to bring an adapter if you're planning to connect to an LCD projector, okay? You also need to know that audio equipment for your computer, so you know the speakers are not automatically included with the LCD package. So if you're going to be playing sound along with visuals and you don't want to be relying on your computer's internal speakers, then you'll want to request audio for laptop, okay? We can go on to the next page. So this is a screenshot of the page in the proposal where you'll indicate the AV information. Okay, so the way it works is that you can choose one free piece of AV equipment from the list at the nearer to the top of the screen. So you could get an LCD package, which includes an LCD projector and a screen. You can get audio for laptop. You could get a CD player and speakers, or a flip chart, okay? So you can get one of those pieces of equipment at no charge. And then if you need to select an additional piece of AV equipment, at that point additional cost would apply, okay? So the prices are outlined there on the form. Actually, Sean, could we just go back for 1 second? Yeah, great. So there's no grant necessary for that first piece of equipment, okay? And you don't need to wait for any kind of confirmation from ATHE staff that the request has been granted, okay? That's automatically a complimentary piece of equipment, that first piece, okay? You can apply for a grant to cover the cost of any additional AV equipment that you need, okay? So for instance, maybe you request an LCD projector package as your first piece of equipment and audio for laptop as an additional piece, and then you would apply for a $100 grant to cover the cost of the audio. All right. And so just remember that you do have to select the AV for your session during this proposal process by November 1st, okay? So no additional AV can be ordered after this date. So it's important that you really think through your AV needs and check in with your panelists prior to submitting your proposal to make sure that you get what you need, okay? And so you'll also have a chance here to tell us the nature of your session, if it's going to be noisy or if you need room to move, okay? And tell us about your audience setup. So you can either get chairs around the perimeter of the room or you can get your audience in theater style, okay? So we're not able to accommodate other arrangements, all right? It's just, there's too many sessions going on for us to ask the hotel staff to be doing other arrangements of chairs. But if you need something different in your room, you're welcome to arrange the room the way you like, just as long as you put it back the way that you found it as your session's ending. Okay, now we're ready to go on to the next slide. So this is the next page in the process, okay? So it's important to remember that your session title is included in the program book, okay? So again, although you have until May 1st to make the final changes, do try to be as precise as possible at this stage, okay? There's a 15-word limit on titles, and there's a 25-word limit on session descriptions. So we'll edit down any descriptions that are longer than that, okay? And this screen is where you can add in your session abstract, okay? So for the question about that. And if you are the session coordinator, please do remind your participants when they send you your paper titles, all of the formatting notes, okay? So remind them not to put quotes around the title or to punctuate with a period at the end of the title. Make sure their italicized titles are entered with asterisks and that they're not using other formats like all caps, okay? So if you remind them ahead of time, it'll save you some work, right? Because if they send it to you in the wrong format, then we'd ask you to fix it before you enter. Okay, we can go on to the next page. So this is just a reminder of some of the formatting that's important about entering session participant names, okay? So no middle initials and no titles like doctor, no degrees like PhD. Please don't use department names, okay? So just the affiliations such as Louisiana State University and not the Department of Theater, okay? Again, no acronyms for institutions. Please don't use dashes between the institution and the place. Please don't forget and assume that a session guest artist or performer doesn't have to pay for registration, okay? And remember that every session needs to have a session coordinator, and that's so that we have a designated point of contact so we can talk to you about any kinds of questions that come up about your session, okay? We can go on to the next slide. So once you've completed your proposal and you've clicked submit, you'll receive the following message with a submission number. Okay, so this is your number to use for reference. And you can also click print form submission so you can save your work for any future questions that might come up. All right. We can go on to the next slide. So November 1st is really the date to remember. Just about everything related to the session proposal is due on November 1st, okay? The one exception to that is that for debut panels, the participant names for those are going to be due no later than May 1st, okay? Because people generally don't know those at this time. We can go on to the next screen. So then you might be wondering, all right, so what happens after I submit my proposal? So the conference planners and committee chairs will receive all of the submissions, and they'll be prioritizing sessions, and then sessions will be scheduled, okay? The conference committee will notify conference planners and committee chairs of the sessions that are scheduled in early February, and then conference planners and committee chairs should notify session coordinators about whether their sessions have been accepted and when they're scheduled by March 1st of 2015, okay? And you can see this timeline on the FAQ about session proposals, okay? So that's there for your reference as well online. Okay, we can go on to the next slide. So we're just gonna pause and take questions here. So any questions about the rest of the session proposal form? Okay, I don't see any coming up at the moment, so I'm going to go ahead and move forward. And Sean, you can go ahead and go on to the next slide. So we're going to spend a little time talking about the conference grant requests. All right, and you can go ahead to the next slide here. So once you've submitted your session proposal, you'll notice that you can go directly to the conference grant request form. And you can go on to the next slide, Sean. But if you'd like, you can also access the grant application form on the Propose a Session page. Okay, so it's the second link on the page, just under the session proposal link. The grant application process is separate from the session proposal process. Okay, and there's more information about the conference grant and guest artist pass requests on this page as well, down in that have questions section at the bottom of the page that we looked at a little earlier. You can go on to the next slide. So conference grants need to be submitted by November 1st, okay? Session coordinators will be notified about grant decisions by early March, okay? So essentially the grant requests follow the same timeline of the session proposals, okay? And you can go on to the next slide. So this is the beginning of the grant information form. So just make sure you fill this out as completely and clearly as possible. You need to identify your goals and objectives with the grant. And just notice that the total amount requested can't be more than $500. Okay, so grant requests can include lodging and travel, audiovisual equipment, and guest passes. Just note that the lodging and travel reimbursement and the guest passes are only granted to presenters who are not involved in full-time teaching in higher education. Okay, so if you're a focus group conference planner, please just make sure that your session coordinators understand that. Okay, so the value of a session guest pass is $50. So for example, let's say you might request a total of $150, $100 to cover the cost of audio equipment for your laptop, and a $50 session guest pass for a guest presenter who's coming just to present at your session. Okay. All right, let's go on to the next screen. So once you've completed the grant request form, make sure you click Submit. And then here you also have the chance to click Print Form Submission so that you can save your work. All right, and we can go on to the next screen. So just a few more reminders about those guest passes, okay? So again, the guest passes are only awarded to presenters who are not involved in full-time teaching in higher education, okay? So for instance, if you're inviting, say, a local theater professional to come and present at your one session, and they're not going to be there for the rest of the conference, then you should apply for a guest pass for that person, okay? So otherwise, what would happen is that when that person arrives on site for your session, then they're going to be required to pay for a one-day conference registration in order to present at your session, okay? So the session guest passes cover admission to one session only, okay? So just please note that and relay that to your guests, okay, so that they understand that it's not an all-day pass to other sessions at the conference. It also doesn't include a program book. Okay, we can go on to the next slide. So any questions about the conference grant requests?
We have one question that's not about the conference grant requests, but Laura asks, does each session need to have both a coordinator and a chair?
Thanks, Sean. Laura, it doesn't have to have a chair. That's up to you. It needs a coordinator so that we have a point of contact, but whether or not the session needs a chair is really up to you. It just depends on the format of the session and whether that's fitting for you. Thanks. Okay. I'm not seeing any other questions popping up at the moment, so let's go ahead and go on. So we're briefly going to talk about focus group pre and post conference requests. Okay. If you are planning a pre or post conference for your focus group, there is going to be another webinar that goes into this process in a little more detail. Okay, so if you're interested in that, that's available for you too. We're just going to hit some of the highlights here. Okay. So the pre-conference reservation form and the pre-conference grant request are also accessed from that same propose a session page. Okay, you'll see the links are listed just below the two that we've talked about so far. So focus group pre and post conference requests are also due by November 1st, and they're allotted space at the conference hotel on a first come, first serve basis. Okay, and you can go ahead and go on to the next screen. So you need to fill out this pre or post conference reservation request form, even if you're planning to have your event off-site, okay? And that's because this form provides us the marketing brochure and program book information about your event, as well as serving as a reservation request for a space at the hotel, okay? So just make sure that you fill out this part of the form completely and to the best of your knowledge. We can go on to the next screen. So some of the questions that you'll need to answer are, where's your session going to be held? Is it going to be off-site or is it going to be at the hotel? Okay. What date and times do you want your event to happen? What's the approximate number of attendees that you expect? And of course, we understand that you don't know that exactly at this point, but your best estimate is helpful. You'll also talk about the session room setup, okay? And just note that our meeting space at the hotel is limited before and after the conference, so we may not be able to accommodate requests for multiple meeting rooms, okay? You're going to let us know if you need a table for registration and materials, and you'll let us know whether you want that set inside or outside of your room. And let us know whether you want food, okay? So please note that no outside food can be brought into the hotel meeting rooms, okay? So any food and beverage that you want for your pre-conference, if it's happening at the hotel, needs to be requested through the ATHE staff, okay? You'll let us know if you have any AV requests for your event, and you'll let us know whether you're going to apply for a grant. We can go on to the next screen. So again, after you submit a pre or post conference reservation form, you'll have the option to go straight to the pre or post conference grant application. The grant requests are due November 1st, and pre and post conference planners will be notified about grant decisions in early March. We can go on to the next screen. So there's no maximum amount that can be requested for a pre or post conference grant, but the funds come from a $5,000 pool that's to be used by ATHE's focus groups to support the pre or post conference sessions, and applications might be fully funded or they might be accepted with only partial funding. Okay, the charge of the funds is to assist focus groups in expanding their educational focus. So the funds should foster creative, pedagogical, and/or scholarly activities that hold true to our organization's stated vision, mission, values, and goals. And the funds can only support activities that occur between July 27th, 2015 and August 2nd, 2015. Okay, so just a few days on either side of the conference. And you can go on to the next screen. So you also can apply for the pre or post conference grant from that main session proposal page. And we can go on to the next screen. So you'll be asked to provide a rationale to support your grant request. And you can go on to the next screen. And you'll also be asked to supply budget information for your event. So that includes both anticipated income and expenses, right? And after, that's fine, Sean, you can go ahead and go to the next page. So after you've submitted, again, please print and save your request. Okay, and you can go on to the next screen. So any questions about specifically about the pre or post conference requests? Okay, not seeing anything come up there. So I'm just going to give a quick summary of some of the information that we've covered, and then we'll have a little more time to ask questions if anything else comes up. So this is just a summary of those helpful tips about entering the session proposal, okay? And again, this is all available online, okay? So if it's flying by too fast for you, don't worry, it's accessible. And Sean, you can go ahead and go to the next page. So make sure that you have received a submission number upon completing your proposal. And you can go on. Make sure you click on that print submission form and print and save for your records. And you can go ahead, Sean, thanks. Make sure you think through your audio-visual needs before you complete the session proposal process. And you can go ahead. Session proposal and the grants deadline is November 1st. We can go on to the next slide. So just a quick review of some resources that are available to you. First of all, there's all these frequently asked questions, okay? And it's at the bottom of the Propose a Session page that's under the Conferences tab, okay? And again, that's where this webinar is going to be posted as well. So you can go back and listen to it again if you like. And then on the next slide, we've got some contact information for you. So Sean is ATHE's communications manager. He's at com@athe.org. Okay, so if you have any web issues that come up as you're submitting your proposal, Sean's a good person to contact. I am at adminassistant@athe.org. If you have any questions regarding your session proposal submissions or AV questions or questions about your pre or post conference, I'm a good person to reach out to. And if you have any questions about the grants, you can contact ATHE's Executive Director, Nancy Erickson. Her email is there as well. And yeah, so feel free to reach out if you have questions that come up. Okay, so any questions that you have before we wrap up? Okay, great. So if you do have any questions, I can stick around for a couple of minutes to answer. But if you feel like you've got your questions answered for the time being, then we'll go ahead and wrap up and let you get to your session proposing. So again, feel free to contact us if you have anything come up. And good luck with your session proposal process. And if you would, please take just a minute to fill out the survey that you'll get after you finish the webinar. It helps us as we keep updating and make it as useful as possible for folks. So thanks so much.